Everyone says this room was locked from the inside. But it wasn't. This is the part of the case no one talks about. Before we begin, understand this. Tonight's story isn't about what was found. It's about what everyone stopped questioning. For years, this case has been summarized with a single, comfortable sentence. The room was locked from the inside. That line appears in reports, it appears in headlines, it appears in almost every retelling of what happened. It's the kind of sentence that sounds final, neat, complete. And once that sentence is accepted, everything else becomes easier. If the door was locked, then no one could have entered. If no one could have entered, then whoever was inside had to be alone. And if they were alone, the list of explanations becomes very short. From there, the conclusions write themselves. An accident, a suicide, or, at the very least, a tragedy with no external involvement. What almost no one notices is how much weight that single sentence carries. Because that one assumption doesn't just describe the scene, it controls the entire investigation. It decides which leads matter, which witnesses are taken seriously, and which questions never get asked at all. Over time, the phrase stops being a theory. It becomes a fact. And once something becomes a fact, people stop looking at it. If you read the earliest coverage of the case, you'll notice something subtle. The first reports are careful. They use words like appeared and seemed. Nothing is absolute yet. But as days turn into weeks, that language changes. Appeared locked becomes was locked. Seemed impossible becomes was impossible. Certainty replaces caution. This happens in more cases than people realize. The first explanation that feels logical becomes the official story. And once that story is repeated enough times, it stops being questioned. Investigators move forward. Journalists simplify. The public memorizes a version that feels clean and complete. But real scenes are rarely clean, and they are almost never complete. Because a crime scene is not a story. It's a collection of fragments. And fragments only make sense if you keep checking how they fit together. In this case, almost no one kept checking the door. They just accepted it. There is one part of this case that almost never makes it into summaries. Not the body, not the position of the furniture, not the time of death, the lock itself. Not whether it was locked, but what kind of lock it was, and more importantly, how it actually works. When you look at the mechanism instead of the story, uncomfortable questions appear. Could it be engaged from the outside? Could it appear secured without being fully set? Could it be manipulated in a way that leaves no obvious damage? These aren't dramatic questions. They're mechanical ones. And mechanical questions have mechanical answers. In similar cases, experts have shown that some locks can be made to look closed when they're not truly secured. Some can be engaged, released, and re-engaged in ways that confuse anyone who only checks them once. Which means something disturbing. A door can look like it supports a story, even when it doesn't. When you reconstruct the scene step by step, the certainty starts to fade. The timeline becomes less rigid. The list of possibilities becomes longer. If the door wasn't truly secured from the inside, then someone could have left, or someone could have entered, or someone could have staged the scene to look simpler than it really was. That doesn't automatically tell us who did what, but it does something just as important. It breaks the illusion of inevitability. The case is no longer impossible, it's just unresolved. And there's a difference, because impossible cases make people stop thinking. Unresolved cases force people to keep asking questions. In this one, almost everything rests on a door that was never examined as carefully as it should have been. Not because investigators were careless, but because once a story feels solid, even professionals stop pushing against it. Most people think investigations fail because of missing evidence. A lost file, a destroyed record, a witness who never came forward. But more often, they fail for a quieter reason, because one early assumption is never challenged. That assumption becomes the frame, And once a frame is in place, every new piece of information is forced to fit inside it. Anything that doesn't fit gets ignored. In this case, the frame was simple. The room was locked from the inside. And as long as that stayed true, no one had to imagine anything more complicated. But if that frame is wrong, then everything inside it has to be re-examined. Not just the door, not just the timeline, but the entire story we've been telling ourselves about what happened. Sometimes the biggest obstacle to the truth isn't silence. It's a sentence everyone agrees with too quickly. Because once a detail becomes obvious, it stops being investigated. And once it stops being investigated, it starts controlling the story. In this case, the door was never just a door. It was the foundation of an explanation that may have been built on something no one bothered to test. And that leaves one question hanging in the air. If the room wasn't really locked, what else have we been wrong about?
This case is over, but the truth is not. The next story is already waiting, and it's darker than you think. Stay with NightCase Chronicle. I'll see you in the next case.